to be on the recording, you'll have to disconnect now. Okay, so last week we talked a little bit about the business value, or the licensing topics around Teams. But this week, what we're going to do is talk a little bit more about how you can get the most out of Teams, why it's valuable, what are some of the things that maybe you didn't know it could do, and how can you leverage it within your business. So one of the things we're going to talk about here is the modern workplace vision, and we touched on this a little bit last week of how the workplace is changing, that there's what we call a digital transformation taking place in many businesses where things are becoming digitized, and the model that they're using for selling things and developing their business really has become digitally focused. And so because of that, there's also a corresponding need to change the way that businesses operate. So they need the agility and the innovation to remain competitive, because their customer expectations are rising, right, about product quality, about the services as those continue to evolve. Businesses also need to be able to attract and retain the right talent. And part of that, some of the surveys that we've done have indicated that some employees are willing to change jobs if the technology that they're using doesn't meet their needs and is lagging behind. It's also important to maintain friction-free collaboration and communication between both your internal teams and your external teams. And we'll talk about how Teams can help facilitate that, even with vendors or business partners that are outside your organization. How can you maintain communication with them? And then underlying all of this is a set of artificial intelligence powered services. So we're talking about things like machine learning, predictive analytics capabilities, and what these do. There's a lot of goofy movies and things like that about the dangers of artificial intelligence, and who knows where we'll be 10 years down the line. But for right now, the focus of this artificial intelligence is really surfacing information about things like your meetings. If I have a meeting with John and Tom and Bill 3 times in a row, and we talk about a certain topic, then the next time that I create a meeting and include John, Tom, and Bill, then Teams is going to suggest that some of the content that we created the last time might be useful to include on this meeting as well. Or if I create a meeting and I include only John and Tom, maybe Teams will say, hey, did you want to include Bill on this? Because you usually collaborate with Bill. So there's a lot of practical and simple things that artificial intelligence can help a business with in terms of streamlining and making sure that their operations are handled very well. As I mentioned, employee needs are changing, and we did touch on this a little bit last week. This idea that by the end of next year, we're expecting about 72% of employees to be working remotely at least 1 day a week, right? This doesn't mean that everybody's working from home all the time, but that they have the ability to work remotely. And that creates its own set of problems from an infrastructure perspective and from an IT perspective. And I'll talk about that in the next slide or two. There's also this idea that about 56% of meetings have at least one remote attendee. And the challenge that creates is that there's always this issue of the people that are in the room getting one message and having one level of participation, and then the person that's dialing in or the person that's joined to a conference call or something like that having a different experience and having a lesser engagement experience. And so how do we bring people into these remote meetings and have them participate fully and be fully engaged in the meeting? And that's one of the things that Teams is helping to facilitate, making sure that people feel like they're part of the meeting, even if they're not physically in the same room. A third of meetings are 100% virtual in nature. This is certainly true here at Microsoft. I mean, I attend probably 10 or 15 meetings a week, and in almost none of the cases am I in the room with somebody from my organization, or even from an external organization. It's usually just me in an office or at my house. So that again kind of deepens the argument about making sure that meetings are accessible for everyone. And then the last bullet point there, 38% of remote attendees joined via mobile. So most people have a smartphone of some sort, whether it's an iOS or an Apple phone or an Android phone. And in many cases, they might be traveling, they might be heading home, they might be picking a kid up from school or whatever. But there's a meeting that's scheduled and they can't miss it, so they have to be able to join on their mobile device. Again, dialing in over a conference call, you're very likely to miss a good portion of the content that's being presented. You'll hear the audio, but if they're talking about something that someone's sharing on their desktop, or sharing some other type of content, that might not be accessible to you just over a conference call. So the point down there at the bottom, that video is becoming the norm, really is true. Now, I know that in some circles, people don't want to be on video, and that's fine. I mean, that's kind of your own personal preference. But the reality is that in many cases, video is important from a desktop sharing perspective, a content sharing perspective, like we're on right now. So if you were just dialed in to this conference, you wouldn't be able to see the slides, and you won't be able to see the desktop sharing that I'll be doing in just a few minutes. So this idea of video becoming the norm really is something that businesses have to take into account when they're designing their infrastructure and designing their collaboration solutions. The problem is that we see that the old ways of collaborating and sharing documents and files simply aren't working anymore. So, just kind of think through this with me. When everything was on-prem, you might have 3 or 4 file servers, depending on the size of your organization, and each one would have a different name. There'd be different file paths and different ways of getting to information. And if you think about it, all of these could be containing information related to the same type of content. So the content is spread out all around, and unless the end user knows exactly which content he's looking for, it might be hard to find. So we need to figure out a way, and we feel that the Teams is the right approach to bring together project efforts and bring all the documentation and collaboration under that one heading for a given team or for a given project. So in this case, you've got this building renovation taking place in Dallas. Then you might create a team called Dallas Renovation Project, and then everybody that's related to this, whether they're facilities or the electricians or the people that bring the furniture in, or the people that are the painters, or whatever it might be, they would all have access to the shared documentation under that one team. The content wouldn't need to be shared in multiple different places. And then once that project was over, then the team could expire, and you could either choose to keep the content or just archive it for future reference. So Employee engagement is really taking center stage in the business world, and I'm sure it's something that most of you, whether you're on a leadership team or not, you're focused on. And historically, it's been viewed as a responsibility of like the HR department, that it wasn't really an integral part of business strategy. But a lot of the studies that we're seeing today have looked at the connection between employee engagement and the company's bottom line, and they've seen that there's a very direct correlation. In fact, that there was a recent study from Gallup that estimated a loss of, globally $7 trillion due to lost productivity from employees that were simply disengaged from the rest of their organization. So it's becoming clear that employees who are not engaged at a high level can actually be a drag on productivity, on innovation within the organization, and on revenue. So we need to focus on this. We need to make sure that people feel like they are a member of a team and that they have the ability to do their best work, depending on what projects they're using and so forth, or engaged in. This was really a fascinating slide to me, and I hope you understand the point that I'm making here. What this is saying is that on average, employees have about 10 meetings per week, and during these meetings, about 60% of them, if you kind of put the numbers together on the graph, they're walking away from that meeting or ending that meeting feeling stressed or unsatisfied with the meeting experience, and 50% of the meeting, the people find the meetings unproductive. So in almost all those cases, the reason for that has to do with what is shared during the meeting. So typically the meetings consist of things like status reports, a specific collaboration effort, sharing some sort of information, talking with a customer, or some other sort of formal meeting type. So over 50%, or nearly 50%, I should say, of the meetings are either status or collaboration meetings. And so there might be multiple tools used across these different meeting types. Some people might be using Outlook or some other type of thing to prepare for the meetings. But really what we need to look at is there a way to make those meetings more productive? For example, can you prepare meetings in advance so that people have an idea of what the content of the meeting is going to be, what they're going to be expected to bring to the meeting in terms of documentation or project reports or whatever it might be, and make sure that the meeting is productive for everyone, that they feel like something has been accomplished rather than just planning the next meeting. And then during the meeting, how can you make sure that the meetings are efficient? How do you make sure that each employee is engaged? If you have employees or people on the call that may have accessibility requirements or language barriers or a hearing deficit, how are you accounting for them? How are you making sure that the meeting experience is good for them? And then once the meeting is done, is it easy for people to, again, find the content? So I don't know how many meetings I've been on where some will say, and we'll send out a summary of this meeting after it's over, and you never see the summary. Is there a way that we can do this in some kind of an automated way so the people that were on the meeting have an automatic record of what took place during the meeting and can easily access it? And that goes to things like making sure that you follow up on your action items. If something was just mentioned during a call and you didn't write it down, it's very easy to forget things like action items. So is the meeting recorded? Are any notes that were taken easily accessible to all the attendees? These are really, really important to making sure that you have productive meetings. One of the things I want to make sure people understand is that Microsoft Teams is not purple Skype. So I've heard this contention many times that it's just a rebranding of Skype and that they just made it purple. And really, it's not. There's a lot more to Teams than just the capabilities that existed in Skype. So Skype had the ability to um, you could do instant messaging. You could, to a certain extent, share files within a chat. For example, you could send a file to another person. You could make phone calls if you had uh, the system set up that way. You could make audio and video calls, and that was really about all that Skype allowed you to do. But Teams takes things, you know, several steps further than that. You've got the ability to do your one-on-one and group chats. You've got your meetings. You've got your enterprise calling and voice. But we've also got this ability to do things like leverage your built-in Office 365 apps, leveraging third-party apps. I'll show you this as we start going through some of the demos. But as we talk about this, I really want you to think about how these types of features and capabilities could be used in your own organization. What could it potentially improve in terms of the way that you conduct your business, the way that you share and provide access to content, to vendors, to other business partners, to people within your organization. So you've got this one feature or capability, communication through chat. So one of the great things about chat is the ability to have persistence of the chat. Now, what I mean by that is if you bring somebody into an organization, you hire a new employee, and there's a project that they're going to be on, and that project has been going on for 3 months, let's say. The person comes in order to get caught up, they have to somehow find a record of all the stuff that's taken place over the course of the 3 months when they weren't employed by you, right? So they might have to have people forward emails to them. They might have to have people send documents to them, and so on. When you have in Teams this idea of persistent channel discussions, when you bring somebody into a team, they will then have access to everything that preceded their employment, right? So they'll be able to see the conversations that took place, the documents that were shared. All of that will be readily accessible to them right within the team that they've been added to. So it's much easier for them to get caught up. Very soon, the ability to do things with secure private channels is also going to be released, if it hasn't already in many organizations. Certainly within Microsoft, we've been using it, but the idea that within a team, an individual channel within that team could be limited in scope to only certain people on that team might be necessary. So for example, there might be a whole team working on a single project, but only a few people need to have access to the budget numbers, or whose contracts are expiring, things like that. So you might want to make that a secure channel. We have the ability to do things like guest access and federation. So guest access, allowing people from outside your organization to join your teams. Federation allows you to chat or make phone calls to people in other organizations. And then the ability to do translation within a team is also something very valuable. There's fun stuff, GIFs, memes, stickers, emojis, and all that. And all these things are available regardless of the client that you're using, whether it's a mobile client, a desktop client, or your browser. And it works across a number of different devices. We talked about meetings, and the meetings, again, are very powerful ways for teams to communicate. whether you're talking about formal scheduled meetings or ad hoc meetings that kind of just spring up as a topic becomes important to a group of people, whether it's 2, 3, 10 people, whatever. And having that relevant content at your fingertips is very important. We have the ability to do things like transcription and automatic translation within Teams. These are very, very important types of content. If you're watching a video or a recording of a meeting, and maybe you didn't quite understand something that the speaker said, you can go through the transcription and see what was spoken at that time. And again, many different types of devices we support these Teams meetings on. I spent a little bit of time last week talking about how we can leverage Teams for calling. You can leverage a couple different ways to connect to the PSTN. I won't go through them again, but you within your Teams client, either on your mobile device or a browser or on your thick client, you can make phone calls through Teams. This is the area that I think is the most interesting, being able to integrate Office 365 apps directly into Teams, being able to use SharePoint, OneNote, Power BI, Planner, Flow. All these things can be built right into an individual team and allow you to kind of work within Teams exclusively rather than having to cut out and move into a different application and then move back into Teams for some of your instant messaging and meeting type activities. And then, as I mentioned before, the ability to extend Teams so that you have third-party applications, as it shows here on this screenshot: Adobe Creative Cloud, Adobe Sign, Asana, Evernote, whatever third-party apps you need. Generally, there's something equivalent or similar in the App Store for Teams, and that can help make Teams even more valuable for you from a business perspective. An area that we didn't really touch on last week is the idea of compliance and security. So Teams, because it's built on Office 365, is subject to the same compliance regulations and rules that Office 365 is. So whatever compliance regulations Office 365 meets, whether it's HIPAA, GDPR, SOC, FedRAMP, all those types of things, Teams is also compliant with those because it's using the same underlying infrastructure. We have the ability to perform e-discovery, to do DLP protection, in chats, conversations. We can do information barriers, legal holds, audits on all the content that's in a team. And you can even do multi-factor authentication. So let's say you have a guest user that you want to have access to one of your teams. You can require that somebody external to your organization, so you work for company A and this person works for company Z, but you want them to have access to data in your team, you can say, I require that you use multi-factor authentication when you connect to my my data. So even though they're not in your organization, you can actually force multi-factor authentication on them to make sure that their guest access is secure. Just wanted to touch on this idea of the Teams devices. There's a whole range of different types of devices that can be used with Teams and that are certified with Teams, whether you're talking about headsets, mobile phone stations, speaker pucks, conference room phones, large screen collaboration devices. All these types of things are certified to work with Teams and can provide a really good experience. Okay, so let's get to the fun stuff. Let's get into the demo. So the first thing that I'm going to do is bring up, I have a desktop here. This is just a virtual desktop that I've got. And I've got teams configured here. So there's a couple things that I kind of want to walk through, and I've used some terms that maybe you're not necessarily familiar with, or you'd kind of like just a refresher. So when we talk about teams, the team is the group here that has the picture, right? So everything under this is part of the team. Now there's no data stored at the team level, right? If I click on this, I don't see any content. If I go to the channels are the general, design, digital assets, web, and so on. These are where data is stored. So I have conversations that are taking place here in the channel, and then any files that are stored, right? So if I copy a file up into this chat that I'm engaged in, okay, so now I've shared this file with everybody who's in this team, and this file gets stored here under files. You'll see this Contoso do mark, whatever it was, creation do Contoso mark, right? So, so the files are stored according to the channel that they're in. So wherever you're having conversations, that's also where the content is being stored. Now, who are the members of this team? If I go to the ellipsis here, I go to Manage Team, it shows me who the owners of the team are, and it also shows me who the members and guests are. So the members and guests have a reduced set of access to the data in the teams. They can't, for example, if you're a member, you can't add somebody as an owner of the team. Only an owner can do that. So that just makes sense. Notice here that I've also added my MSN account as a guest. So this is clearly outside the organization, but I, as a guest user, have access to the content in this team by virtue of being added as a guest. So depending on the controls that they've allowed me, here in settings, my guest permissions, so they can allow me to create and update channels, they can allow me to delete channels, but as you can see, they have not. So there's lots of controls that you can apply to people depending on their right to certain information. But this is where you would define the members of the team. And what this means is that everybody on this team has access to the content in all these channels. Now, I did mention before that when private channels come out, that you'll be able to restrict access. I'll be able to create a channel called, budget or whatever, and that budget channel will be a secure private channel, and I might say, okay, only Lydia and Grady and Jordan have access to that channel. So I'll be able to take a subset of the people within this channel and grant them access to the that particular channel. All right. So that's kind of the basics of how the teams and the channels are broken down. Now, something that sometimes people aren't aware of, and it's kind of an interesting thing, is up here in the command bar. If I type a slash, I get a whole set of commands that I can run. So, for example, I can look at mentions, and this will show all the times that I, meaning Megan Bowen, have been mentioned in a team. So I go like that, and nothing. So apparently she's not commented on very often there. All right, moving on. Things that I can do. So here I've got the general channel, and notice that I can, for one thing, channel notifications. I can turn them off. If they're getting too noisy, I can say, don't tell me when the channel is mentioned, or don't tell me when there's something new in the channel. Just, I'll go find it, but don't show a little pop-up or anything like that. I might want to be quiet. But the other thing you can do in here is connectors. Connectors allow this team and this channel specifically to connect to an external service that I might want to have access to. So for example, I might want to have access to Trello or to Zendesk, maybe a Twitter feed or a Yammer feed, Bing News, GitHub. I can have a connection to any of these services using Teams. So if I say I'm going to configure the forms, I'll log in. And okay. Oh, I have to create a form first. That's why. Sorry about that. But if I created a form somewhere, I would be able to reference that form, and then the information about that form would be sent to the channel each day. If we go down here to here where you can see things, to the conversation area, a couple things I wanted to mention. Notice that it says you can @mention someone. So I can say @Isaiah, please take a look at the attached PPT. Okay, so I'm referencing this one. It's not really attached, but whatever. So what happens is Isaiah, when he logs into his Teams client, he'll see that he's been referenced in this conversation. It'll direct him to this conversation so that he knows what to do. There'll be a highlighted area up in this channel. It'll have a little red @mention sign. So that's something valuable for narrowing down the stuff that you're supposed to do. Okay, so there's two different types of chat, right? The one that we're in right now is the Teams channel chat, and each channel has its own chat conversation going on. So they're separate. They're each taking place within those channels. I can also have a chat, however, with somebody privately. So let's say I want to chat with Isaiah. I'll say, hey, Isaiah. Oh, I picked the hardest name to spell. What's the latest? Okay. So now Isaiah he'll get that little pop-up when he logs in, and he'll see that that I was trying to contact him. Now notice, however, as I mentioned, he is offline right now, but when he logs in, he'll still get that instant message. It's not like it just goes off into nowhere. That's something that's available to him whenever he logs in. Any files that I've shared with Isaiah will be listed here. I also have information about where Isaiah sits in the organization, right? So I see that he's in the same organization as me, but I can also see who his bosses are and so forth, and then what activity Isaiah has engaged in on other teams. All right. Going into files, files shows us information that is related to, obviously, the files within Teams or other cloud storage locations that that we've defined. So if I go to Teams, this will give me a listing of all the files in all the teams that I'm a part of. So we see The one that I just uploaded is that the one with the French name or whatever it is, and it tells me where it's located, as well as any other of these documents or files that have been shared in different locations. Something that's interesting to note, though, however, is that in each of these cases, they're listed as sites. So what this tells me is that in each of these files are located in SharePoint. And that's how I know that they're part of a team. Now, if I go to OneDrive, OneDrive tells me the files that I've shared with somebody else. Okay, so this shows me the information that has been shared out to somebody else. So I shared this picture of a broken pipe with someone, this OneNote, this expense report, and so on. So I get the information about what documentation and files I've shared with somebody else, not within a channel, because I can go in here, right, to Isaiah, and I can share that same file. I share it with him. Okay. And now it will show up here. But if I go down to files, it shows me that it's also stored under my OneDrive, because it has now become, let's see, where's it going to show up? It might not be. Oh, there it is right there. So that's where we get the information about where those files have been stored. There it is, Microsoft Teams chat files. So this is the one that I just uploaded. It goes into this chat files, and it tells me that it was shared, and I can get information about who it was shared with and so on from this area. Okay, continuing on. Any questions so far? I know I've shown you guys a lot of things. Let me take a look at the questions real quick. Can you change the sound of the notification? I often miss the alerts. I believe there is in here. No, I don't think
Hey, Dave,
so.
it's Rory.
Yeah.
From what I'm seeing, you can't change the sound, but it's a feature request that has been requested.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so you did answer that. Sorry. Okay.
No worries.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we talked about a couple different things there. You know, the basic structure of the teams. There is a limit right now to the size of a team. So you're limited to 5,000 users in a given team. So for many organizations, that's good enough. But if you have more, then there are other approaches to how to share information on a large scale like that. So you can use Yammer or something like that. If we go down here, so I had mentioned the idea of the connectors, right? So the connectors down here, but you also have the ability to add applications to a team. So if I go to Manage Team and look at Apps, it shows me the applications that I've added to a team. Now, how can we use this type of information? If you notice down here, there's a couple different things that we can add into an individual conversation. So for one thing, I can format it, right? So it doesn't have to just be this type of typing, right? I can highlight it, I can change colors, I can do whatever I need to do just by hitting that there and change colors and stuff like that, right? So nothing terribly interesting there. You can attach a file, you can do your little smiley faces, you have GIFs, right? You've got your memes and stickies. So if you might have a favorite type of meme, there's one in here for office drama. It's usually got some pretty comical ones in there. But what's interesting is here, there's a Wikipedia search. So I can go in here and say I want to find out about Avengers Infinity War. And there I have the Wikipedia search. So I did a Wikipedia search on that, and I can then do whatever I need to do with that information. I can do the same thing with Bing News. So I can find information, let's say, about earthquakes. And so this is interesting. I live in North Carolina, so there's been some earthquakes in Charlotte. So you can do quick lookups there and share that information out. You also have the ability to do the same thing like with stock or something on GitHub. You can also do praise for people. So if someone's doing a good job, you can send praise to them and say, you're a real team player. Good job, Isaiah. And then he gets his little praise there. So things like that are useful for making sure that teams are feeling engaged and making sure that the information is very accessible to them. I mentioned the ability to access information and not have to leave the team's client. So normally, if you're going to open an Excel spreadsheet, you have to open Excel. But from here, I can just do edit in Teams. And I can go right in here and start working on the document. Goat for start time. Right. So you can start editing right there in Teams. You don't have to leave the Teams app. Some other things that are really cool in Teams, and one that I don't think I mentioned at all so far, is shifts. So shifts is a time tracking or scheduling capability that organizations can take advantage of. So you can add a group to a specific team. So in this case, it's the X1050 launch team. And we're looking at the current week. You can set the different time zones and so forth. But I can go in and I can say, add a shift for Megan, because let's close this. So we don't have anybody for the 9 to 6 shift. I have somebody for 1 to 10, but I need to add somebody to 9 to 6. So I'm going to add Megan to this shift. Nine to 6. I'll give her a 60-minute lunch break. I'll tell her that she needs to restock the shelves. And that will be from 10 to, let's say, 2 o'clock. Okay. So now she knows what she's supposed to do. Now, once I share it with the team, then each of these individuals, Megan and Grady, will have this new information populated to their shift instance. Right now, if they logged in, they wouldn't see the updates, which are indicated by the little stars there. Those are new entries in the timekeeping. But once I share it with the team, then those will be cleared out, and now everybody has the same set of content there. I can go up here and look at requests. So I see that Megan has requested some time off for next week, and I can go ahead and approve that and say, have fun, and approve it. And now if I go to next week, I see that her vacation time has been approved. Okay. So this is really good on the mobile devices. So there's obviously the Teams client and the Shifts tool, within the Teams client works really, really well on like an Android or an iOS device, an Apple device. And it's very simple for users to understand how to use it. You can also share files and stuff like that within this application, and you can print it and so forth. You can have settings, so you can define what type of time off request a person can submit for. Right? You can add a custom option and call it need to go to Six Flags. Right? So whatever you want to call it. And that will then be an option for them to use when they request time off. This is an interesting area, time clock. So this allows you to check in using your a time clocking system like Chronos or something like that. And what it's going to require is that you verify with GPS coordinates where you're checking in from, so that you can actually verify that people have shown up maybe on site at a job. So for example, if you're building a house or something like that, and you want your employees to check in and verify that they're actually on site, then you can define what are the coordinates that I expect that to be coming in from, and it'll pull the coordinates off of your mobile device. So very valuable for people that have mobile employees. Okay, so that is shifts, and that's just a brief rundown of shifts. It's not comprehensive by any means. One of the other things that's nice about the channels themselves. So notice we're in the conversations, but I can start a meeting right now within this channel. So if I start a meeting in this channel, and I'll add a subject, urgent budget meeting, and I say meet now. So it's not going to work very well because it's in a virtual machine. There's no microphone or any other devices, but I can invite people to the meeting. So I can start the recording, and once this is done, I'm going to stop the recording and end the call. So now, let's say we've had the call, and so somebody needs to go back and look at it. You see what's happening right now is it's saving the recording to Microsoft Stream. So, and it's saving it in this channel. So remember I had spoken about before the idea that someone new comes onto the team and they need to go back and kind of understand what's going on. This is how you could actually do that. Now, if I had saved or shared any files, those files would be stored up in here in the Files tab. And then once this recording is saved to Stream, they can actually go back and review the recorded meeting within Stream. So really valuable information and very useful for people to go back and see the history of a certain thing. You can also, however, of course, define recurring meetings and set up meetings that are necessary here within Teams. You can do the meet now type of meeting, or you can have a scheduled meeting. There's also the idea of a live event. So a live event supports very large meetings. So let's say you wanted to do a town hall type of meeting, or you wanted to do like a shareholder meeting, or you wanted to just advertise a new product that you're marketing. You could do this over a live event and share your information to a whole bunch of people, up to 10,000 attendees on that meeting. If you just want to do a standard meeting, you can also set that up using this. You can define what channel you want this to take place in. So let's say I want it to be in the project, a Mark 8 project team with the engineering group. And then I invite the people that are part of that team. See if there's anybody named John. Joni. All right, I'll invite Joni. And we'll leave it like that. Okay. So now that meeting is going to be stored within the channel for engineering. And so anytime anybody wants to go back and review the meetings that the engineering group has had, those meetings will be recorded right here, along with all the notes that were taken, right? If they take any meeting notes, those will be accessible here. Any files that they share will be accessible here. All the content is going to be stored in a single central location. I didn't mention before, but the idea here of having files stored in a single location, if I open this up in Teams, you can't see it right now because I'm the only one working on the document, but we do allow co-authoring in the document. So if there were more than one person that had this document open, you would see their little avatar over here, and you'd be able to see what cell they were in Excel. You'd be able to see, their name and so forth. You could initiate a chat with them if, for example, you were both trying to edit the same cell. You could have a chat with them right directly there within Teams and try to resolve the issue. Let's see, what else can we talk about? I did mention last week the idea that you can have multiple types of cloud storage. So if, for example, you have a Dropbox, Box, ShareFile, or Google Drive instance, you're able to include those into your team. By default, it's going to use SharePoint, which you see here. But notice here that I've also got Box set up as one of the potential storage locations. So even though I'm working within the team, my files can be stored in Box if I've allowed that. So I can go directly into Box and see the information that's been stored up there. But by default, it's going to be stored in SharePoint, as I noted before. And this is what it'll look like. Whoops. I have to log in with a different credential. Okay, so I've got just a couple minutes left. I wanted to leave that open for any questions. If anybody has any questions, you're welcome to come off mute. I certainly didn't cover everything possible. One of the things that I do generally like to share with people here is the admin experience. And one of the things that's important is the idea that you can expire your teams. So your teams are based on Office 365 groups, and Office 365 groups are stored under your Azure Active Directory Admin Center. So if I go in here, I can say my group lifetime, which by extension is also going to be my team's lifetime, is 180 days, or I can say 365 or some other combination. What that means is that at the end of 180 days, the owner of that team will get an email that says, hey, you've had this team open for 180 days. Do you still need the content in there? And I can say, no, go ahead and archive it, or yes, I still need it open. Don't do anything with it. And it'll just extend the lifetime. I can also say only expire these specific groups. So for my summer interns, maybe they're only going to be there for 90 days or whatever, then I can expire that. If it's just for a product launch event, that's only good for the time that the product is being launched. So I might want to expire those. I can also define a naming policy. So for example, if I want to exclude dirty words or specific names or aliases, I can get a list of words. This is the ones that I've set up for this particular set of groups. And it'll just show me the words that I've excluded from being used as team names. So, for example, you might not want to allow HR to be a defined team name unless it's created by the HR department. I can also create a naming policy. So in this case, what will happen, I said, I want this to be the prefix for every group that I create and for this to be the suffix. So any group that I create will have this structure. So you can create some structure around how the teams are named so that it's easy to, kind of categorize who created the groups or, the fact that it is a group, things of that nature. We can use attributes as well. Say attribute is the company name, right? And it just appends it there. So lots of different ways that you can manage your teams, govern your teams. I certainly don't have enough time to get into any of the things like blocking keywords and data loss prevention policies and so forth. But are there any questions that I can answer? No?
Doesn't appear so.
Okay. I'll show you one more thing. This is something that a lot of organizations are concerned about. So let's say I decide that I'm going to put some credit card numbers and a bank account number in a chat, and I'm going to send that. I've created a policy that says if I detect any of these types of things, I'm going to block it. And you'll see here in just a moment. There we go. It says the message was flagged. So even though I see it myself within within the general channel.
Hey, David, you're not sharing your screen right now.
Oh, shoot. Bummer. Oops, wrong one. All right. So what I did was I put this this information into the chat. I sent it, and then let me just show you what it looks like. Speed. So I send it, and then in just a few seconds, team says, nope, you can't send this because it's got this content. So even though I see it in the general channel, I'm the only one that sees it. If I logged in as one of the other team members, they wouldn't see this content at all. This is just giving me as the sender a notification that my content was not delivered. And so, you can either give them the option of going ahead and sending it or having it sent for review or whatever you want. But that's usually something that some organizations are concerned about. Okay, now I really am out of time. Any questions I can answer for anybody? Okay, then I'll go ahead and stop the recording.